think that worked. Hopefully. We'll find out here momentarily. Where's the chat? Did not remain popped out, but that's okay. Yep, that looks fine. So hello everyone. We are back. Yeah. Let me grab a little something. It's time for the Friday Anime live stream. Looking forward to this, as I do every Friday, because you all are very interesting folks to talk to. Well, it's a bit too hot. That tea has just come right out, and that is no good. Cannot handle that personally. Let's see what's up on the anime news. What anime news is of note this week? Stage play for the Ancient Magus' Bride. Awesome. VFX Japan Award for Batman Ninja. Okay. New Wotakoi anime episode previewed in trailer. Nice. It's about a month out from the new anime season, so we're starting to get a lot of the just the basic news about upcoming things. Hey Jordan. Hey Gene. Announcement there's going to be a second year of the current Gegege no Kitaro anime. That's going to be a long-running show. That's awesome. We enjoyed that. Ascendance of a Bookworm. Getting a TV anime series. Not sure what that is. Let's pull that in. Yeah, a lot of just, trailers for things coming out. Romance game inspired by Rosa Versailles. Nice. Yeah. Otherwise, not seeing a lot to shock. Crunchyroll's doing a dub for Roka Braves of the Six Flowers, which came out, I think, last year, the year before. Interesting. Wow. The next Digimon Adventure Films trailer will come out in early spring of 2020. Hard to believe that 2020 is coming. It seems so far away back in the day. One Punch Man premiering on Hulu April 9th. Duly noted. Hey, Game Escape. What else have we got? Stage play adaptation of Blood Blockade Battlefront. Okay. Seems like a weird thing to do a stage play of. Anime song label 0A will shut down at the end of the month. Let's right-click on that. Simulpubs for Kodansha Comics. Let's do that in. $100 million for Alita in China. Good. We'll see the numbers there. Live action City Hunter. French film. Funimation will make a new Dragon Ball Z Blu-ray disc collector's edition if it receives 2,500 pre-orders. Well, that's going to happen. Let's just be honest. There are 2,500 people who will pre-order a DBZ Blu-ray collection. Let's just be honest. That looks like all of the big stuff. Oh, new tiered membership system for Funimation in April. Let's see what that. All right, so let's click on these. Udon Entertainment has licensed Stravaganza Queen of the Iron Mask. Looks like a fantasy series about a girl wearing more or less a bikini while wielding a sword. Sort of a masked. Yeah, that's a ridiculous outfit. That is an absolute, even by manga standards, that is an absurd outfit. A lot of, boob and butt shots. So, one of those sort of things. Fair enough. Ascendance of a Bookworm. What is that? Cute main character. A certain college girl who's loved a book ever since she was a little girl dies in an accident and is reborn. She is now 5 years old and sickly. and she's reborn in a world where literacy is very rare and books are expensive. So she decides to start making books and become a librarian. Sounds cute. Music label Zero A will cease operations, part of Universal Music, starting in 2013. Fair enough. They manage Heart Invader, Petite Milady, and other folks. Not too familiar with. So Kadokawa's Bookwalker online manga and light novel service has added 8 titles from Kodansha Comics to its simulpubs, with new chapters released the same day as in Japan. They include Aposyms, whatever. The thing by Tsutomu Nihei of Knights of Sidonia and Blam. Devil's Line, Domestic Girlfriend, Drifting Dragons, Eden Zero, Grand Blue Dreaming, To Your Eternity, which is the latest thing by the creator of A Silent Voice, and Wave Listen to Me. They also offer simulpubs of some Yen Press titles. Both of these services, or both Yen Press and Kodansha, offer simulpub on like Comixology and Crunchyroll as well. So, cool. So Alita's made $100 million actually $112 million in China as of its second weekend. So it's number 2 in China that weekend. Earned $62 million in its opening weekend in China. So worldwide total is now $350 million, where they said they needed 400 to break even. So it might actually do fairly well. Gintama getting another season, you say? Cool. Wow, that's weird, Fisher. Okay, so Alita might do okay. Funimation will introduce a new tiered membership subscription service. So 3 tiers: Premium, Premium Plus, and Premium Plus Ultra. Hilarious. All of them will have HD access, ad-free. The premium tier will be $6 a month, which will allow 2 users to stream simultaneously. So that's nice. So if you have, you're sharing an account with somebody. Premium Plus is $8 a month, 5 simultaneous user streams, and episode downloads, plus special member-only events and benefits at the Funimation shop. Premium Plus Ultra is only annual, and it's $100 a year. So it's like $9 a month, which also gives you an annual gift on membership on. Okay, you get an annual gift. You get 2 pay-per-view rentals per year, and free shipping on all Funimation shop orders. Yeah. Premium members will automatically become Premium Plus members, which is nice. But they will get a rate of $6 a month instead of the Premium Plus rate of $8 a month. So if you're currently at the whatever the premium membership is, you'll get a higher membership, but you won't have to pay for it. Cool. I'm sure eventually it'll roll over, but members will be able to keep that new price as long as the membership stays current. Wow, that's pretty awesome. So you actually get the medium tier instead of the lowest tier, and you get that for the life of your account. Cool. And then the family and friends and power-up add-on options will go away. So this will kind of simplify their options. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Hey, Jay. There's nothing too surprising this week. Just some more stuff around. That Ascendance of a Bookworm series is based on a novel. Sorry, is that a light novel? Yeah, light novel series, which has a manga adaptation, which you can get on J Novel Club. Based on I'm sorry, not a light novel. Originally, online novels, and then it got light novel, and now a manga. 7 volumes so far in the manga, so definitely going well. 1 million copies of the novel series in print. So definitely a successful series. So hopefully that comes over and people will enjoy that. We will see. So how are you all doing this week? What's been new in your worlds? I don't know if you can see. Pretty much cleaned up. I had some pieces of wood in here over the past couple of hours as I was assembling a trestle table in this room not that long ago, which was a lot of fun. It's basically a table that you can put together and take apart. It's all just, some pieces are screwed together, but those pieces that are all screwed together, you can then assemble and disassemble it as many times as you want. It's all kind of tongue and groove fitting together. So it has been quite interesting to go in and, sorry, just checking something out here, and build that. So I got kind of the beginnings of that all assembled tonight, which feels good. It's a thing basically for the D&D group to have a table we can lay everything out on. So you have that. Watching Big O again. Big O, Big O, Big O, Big. No, 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 no. Non Biori movie coming out. Cool. That is such a fun series. Was such a fun series. Non Biori. Light, enjoyable thing. Just light all around. Anything you guys want to talk about this week? Nothing much really in the news to spark much discussion. Glad to see the Alita movie doing okay. As I mentioned before, that will get more attention on anime and can lead to more money flowing into the industry, which is a good thing. Did have a weird thing happen this week. If you saw on the Discord, I tweeted that Robotech came out in America 19 years ago this week, and it kind of blew up. Got a bunch of retweets and likes, and well, it's kind of a shame because I did get a few people who were like, it would have been better if Robotech had never come out. Robotech was a travesty. It's just like, okay, chill out. Maybe don't take a celebration as an opportunity to complain. That is Twitter. It does feel like that is such a problem with Twitter particularly. Do you ever watch an anime like it, but forget to continue all the time, all the stinking time? I finally got back to Land of the Lustrous recently, which that was very much a case of. But there are just many, many of those. Kitaro is a good one. A lot of things. Part of the problem is doing these quarterly anime streams. I'll watch a show and be like, I like that, but there are 6 of them this season that I would not mind watching more of, but I'm not going to keep up with 6 shows, right? Same thing with classic stuff, where I'll watch an episode or 2 or come across something online. I'm like, this is neat. I like to watch more, but my queue is so big. I think everyone's queue is pretty big. I still haven't finished Evangelion, for goodness sakes. That's just absolutely crazy. So that is a shame. Are there anime you guys have watched, liked, and forgotten to continue? Something that appealed but just didn't really sync up for whatever reason? Yeah, the Sprigano one, that's weird. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. You don't have to like Robotech, but to say the world would be better without Robotech is basically saying, the world would be better if the anime industry and anime fandom were impoverished. If there was much less money going over to the industry, if there were fewer things going on. Jay, I don't even know how to begin on that one. Differences in artwork in some anime decades compared to one another. There's really no. It's weird because there are so many differences over the course of time. And part of the problem is you get like Takahashi's artwork and her style, which is so emblematic of the late 70s, early 80s. But it's not like everyone was copying Takahashi so much. It's just that was a popular, style. Her shows were popular, so people were aware of that style. Oh, she's talking more about like overall like art design. I see what you're talking about. Yeah, that's a good topic actually. It's that's a really interesting one because I think if you go all the way back to say the '70s, you see a wide variety of styles because the '70s you had all the kids shows, and then you had stuff like Space Battleship Yamato and Galaxy Express 39s and Harlock. These shows that were trying to be very dark, and while stylistically they weren't dark, they certainly had a more cinematic style than Doraemon, for example. Yeah, you're right. Noses have certainly gotten smaller. Although it's weird because Tezuka's noses are also usually very small. So I feel like it kind of started small, then got big, and then got small again. But yeah, I think there's a lot of that kind of differentiation in approach. Although I think in general the '70s are pretty bright, primary color kind of a decade for art in general. And then you get the '80s where things got progressively darker because anime was now able to do like Macross and Gundam and very apocalyptic shows. So you got these very dark apocalyptic sort of color schemes and approaches to things, and also I think just the much larger evolution in representation of action that you got in Gundam, Rosa Versailles, Macross, and such really helped to improve that, where you get these you get people thinking about color, thinking about what these things look like, more so than in the '70s when a lot of things were actually, frankly, more determined by marketability. Like if you're going to sell figurines of something, then they had to be in very simple colors because you could not necessarily pay for really detailed colors on those figurines. So you wanted to have simple reds and blacks and blues and such for your character designs and your mecha designs especially. It's really interesting seeing like '70s and '80s mecha were almost always like simple primary colors because those were the colors that kids could actually get to paint their model kits with. But yeah. So yeah, so I think you got that, and then of course Akira, I think was a game changer because it was so literally visually dark. So much of that movie is set at night, and is set in dark places, and yet has a style that is very clear to the viewer. Right? It's not. It never looks really muddy. So people were like, "Oh, okay, we can do that. We can do these things that are visually dark." And I think you combine that with other things at the time, like Wicked City and Demon City Shinjuku, and stuff like what came out of my head. Bubblegum Crisis. I think these really, these shows that are set in the dark, basically, that really brought that in as a thing. And then the '90s were a bit more wild. You got a lot of space fantasy, a lot of just straight up fantasy. And so you contrast, for example, El Hazard with Macross Plus, with, I don't know, I'm trying to think of other, mid '90s shows, or early to mid '90s stuff. And there's just this sort of wild variation in tones, which means a wild variety in kind of artistic approach. Outlaw Star, I think, is another good example. Although that was, I think, '99? Late '90s, anyway. Trigun. So you see definitely a maturity in artistic style by the '90s, where it's not just kind of one style for everything. If you're doing a comedy, you can be very bright. If you're doing a drama, you can be not just dark, you can be subdued. Infinite Revias is a great example where that does not have a lot of bright colors because it is it's a dim show, and it's about these astronaut kids, and it's really hard. Yeah, Summer Wars I think is a great example of a very artistically a movie where they very much thought about the art, and I think Hosoda in general, his films are very very carefully thought out artistically in terms of just the visual style, visual approach of those movies. They all share a general visual aesthetic, but the tone of Summer Wars, for example, is quite different than the tone of Wolf Children. And I don't just mean in terms of like the story, but also in terms of like the art. The color palette of those feel quite different, even though they're not massively different in like color variation, right? It's not like one is all washed out, but they just feel really different. Super Marionette J, yeah, that's definitely. I actually disagree with you on GA. I think there are some really weird character designs out there. I think Land of the Lustrous is a great example, where those are some really really distinctive character designs. I think it's just it's like anything else. The weird things just are pushed to the side, and remember like Super Marionette J because it came over here. But there are a lot of things that that just we get and it just kind of disappears. Although certainly, I think I think you're right in that I think there was a lot more variation in character designs back then. I think the Moe approach of the 2000s kind of homogenized things more than they were say in the 90s or even the 80s. But I think there are they're out there. They're just not as obvious. Yeah, but then the Super Marionette J style is just really hard to draw, I would expect. The more stylized you get, the harder it is to actually replicate that in animation. Which is why I generally don't see that done that much. Interesting game escape. I have not noticed that really. I love hand drawn. I love hand painted. I love that aesthetic. But I don't feel like the current stuff is looks particularly plastic. I think they're just as well crafted. They just look different. They look shinier. But I don't feel like they feel like there's a machine made aspect to them. Personally. Designs were sharper. Huh. What do you mean by sharper? I'm curious. I'm just trying to apply that word to character designs, and I'm just my brain is failing on that one. Boy, that's really flashy. Interesting. Sorry if I'm giving anyone strokes. But it's interesting. There's a like we were talking about on the Discord the other day that a lot of modern teenagers are finding themselves really attracted to like 80s style animation because of the very different approach to just animation as a medium, where you had those very highly animated shots in something, or heavily styled shots where the colors and the camera angle and so forth are just very distinctive, which could be swimming in a sea of mediocrity in terms of shots and art and so forth. But you would get these individual moments that were just really remarkable. Whereas today you tend to see it tends to be more uniform, and not necessarily in a bad way, but just if it's high, if you have a high animation budget, it tends to be more spread out through the entire show. You don't wait until the one moment so much. Oh, I see what you mean, Seth. Yeah, I. That's certainly true. That the character designs themselves had more, angles and curly cues and weird little things to them. And I think it's one of those things where, dang, that is hard to draw from that angle, or this angle. If you're trying to replicate those geometries at an odd direction, that's really tough. And I think it's one of the things you see differentiating things is that if you watch, say, all-purpose cultural cat girl Nuku Nuku, which has some pretty traditional sort of '90s character designs in terms of being distinctive, but look like they're of that era. You don't often see the characters from a lot of different angles. The faces you see from like a couple of different angles, and like kind of that's it, as I recall. And you're right, the nose and Stefani could cut ham, no question. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of um, there's it's a natural evolution of animation that you go for designs that are easy to animate. I think the designs of the '90s were hard to animate because, and partly because again there was all that money in the industry, so they could afford to. They could afford to experiment and try weird things, to some extent. And it's the thing you saw like in early animation. The reason that Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny and all those had these really rounded shapes is because they're a lot easier to draw and easier to animate. The movement of a circle is easier to represent than the movement of a very angular thing in terms of multiple dimensions. When Chip and Dale have to tumble down a snowbank, trying to think about all of those, all the portions of their anatomy translated into individual lines, and representing all of that in a very angular shape would be a lot harder than with very soft shapes. So I think it's just something that we're seeing in the industry, and I think it's not going to necessarily be forever, but it's just the way animation just kind of tends to go. We get these cycles, and we're in a kind of a homogenized cycle, and I think it's one of the reasons why we're getting much better animation quality in terms of like animation budget today than we had 10 years ago, because they're easier to animate. So they all kind of look the same, but then you do get more frames of animation, and it's like I think in general fandom has been shown to want more of the latter than the former. They don't really care in general that the designs look really unique. Well, yeah, Jay, there were no computers in anime in the '80s. Definitely, that would have been hideously expensive. Um, yeah, exactly. It is kind of a trade off to an extent. Obviously, not all the time, but it's a thing. It's one of the reasons why anime characters in general are less detailed too. The if they have noses, they are marks. Even if they're long noses, it's just like kind of a single mark and a dot, things along those lines. Um, the eyes are pretty detailed, but the mouth is often just a few lines. That simplification just makes them easier to animate, and which means you can animate more of them. There can be more movement. What's also interesting is we're now seeing that blend of hand drawn and CGI, where you'll have a show that they will hand draw the characters and have CGI models of the characters for different things. So obviously the idol shows have the CGI models for the concerts, but even stuff like the Magnificent Kotobuki, I think, from this season, where the main characters are all CGI models, but the side characters are all hand drawn, but they're all made to look very similar in artistic style, right? So I think we're going to see some interesting stuff out of there in terms of finding the right balance between, doing hand drawn when you need hand drawn and CGI when CGI makes sense when you're trying to represent these things. So you gotta figure that out in terms of how to, and the industry will have to figure all that out. And you have the movies that have just ridiculous budgets, and it's like they can just throw money at it and just throw sales at it. Metropolis is probably the movie that's you know um, that has the highest animation budget of anything I've ever seen. I don't think anything's ever really equaled the sheet count, the raw sheet count of Metropolis, in terms of number of characters on there, number of you know, the amount of things moving on screen at any one time in Metropolis is just mind blowing, and you know, a very large percentage of that hand drawn. But again, it's because it's a Tezuka work. It was done when there was a big Western market, so the money was just there and flowing. So yeah, and then obviously Akira as well. But probably because that was just an odd passion project that managed to get just huge funding. So, I mean, one of these days, someone like Watanabe will get a Hollywood-style budget, and he's gonna make his Akira his Metropolis, or someone like that is just gonna have something ridiculous detailed. I mean, I think even the Eva movies are really impressive on a pure animation level. I think you can, and I mean the Rebuild movies. I think you can show the Rebuild movies to someone who is not an anime fan, and provided they can get past the fundamental weirdness that is Evangelion, they will recognize the quality of that. They will be kind of just mind blown. A remake of Akira. Wow. I would like to see not a remake of Akira personally. I would like to see a sequel to Akira. I'd like to see Otomo come back and adapt the rest of the manga. Because it'll look different. Like it will not look like the original movie. It'll be fascinating to see a trilogy that adapts the rest of that story. Will CGI replace hand-drawn animation anytime soon? Humans are terrible at predicting the future. So I cannot say. They're definitely making great strides. The one thing I will say is that the anime industry is very conservative. Not in the political sense, or the political party sense, but in the sense that they're not going to change things until they know that the change will work. So I think we will see more and more CGI, but I think we're going to see that, it's not going to be like... I think a lot of anime fans are concerned that what's going to happen to anime is what happened to the American market, where everyone jumped to not just CGI, but half-baked CGI, where they just abandoned hand-drawn, but CGI really wasn't ready to take over for hand-drawn yet at an aesthetic level. And I don't think that's going to be the case for anime. I think we may eventually see CGI overtake, but... I think they are absolutely waiting until that CGI is of the right quality. I think Land of the Lustrous is an example where, I gotta be honest, much as I love hand-drawn, if anime looks like Land of the Lustrous from now on, I would not be displeased. That just looks amazing. And so I'd be all up for that. And part of that is because, and here's the other thing too, is if we do get more CGI, we're going to see more CGI in the style of anime. You look at Land of the Lustrous, and they're not just choosing any old camera angle for the characters. They're choosing very traditional anime-style angles for characters. When folks fly through the air, they have very kind of Naruto or One Piece style movement where you get, zoom in on the fists, then you zoom in on the eye. As they're kind of flying through the air, those very stylized, movements. So I think you're really getting that. You're really getting something really distinctive. So I think they're taking that right step of using the lessons of anime and applying those to CGI. Not to try to make the CGI look exactly like anime, but to say we have learned a lot about how to represent action and how to show characters visually and how to compose shots. How to design characters, and let's apply that to CGI intelligently. Land of the Lustrous notably has that gorgeous glowy hair, but the character designs are very simple, right? Very simple lines on those characters, so that you're not distracted. The eye is very easily drawn to various aspects of the scene. I think that's really, really smart. Yeah, you're right. CGI crowds are everywhere. I mean, I haven't seen a hand-drawn car in anime in years. So I think, CGI is totally integrated. Just a question of, again, how to make it work right. Yeah, Your Name I think is again, Your Name is um, a tough thing to compare with because it is such a such an exception, but totally. Um, That'll be, I think, the acid test. GA, you're right. I think if the new Riding Bean OVA has CGI cars, that will be the indication that CGI has won the car war within anime. Um, if they feel comfortable that those CGI cars will work in Riding Bean, where Riding Bean is a thing that is sold primarily on the cars, then we know the industry has decided, so to speak. We'll see. And again, it's a great example of that drawing approach where it's like, imagine trying to draw a car that you don't own, that you don't have, that you can't just go out and take a picture of, and and draw that from any given camera angle. That must have been really hard work. So it makes sense to just render that in CG. New Bubblegum Crisis. You mean Tokyo 2040, Jay? Or another Bubblegum Crisis? Because it seems like there's there've been so many Bubblegum Crises over time. Bubblegum Crises. CGI remake of Redline. That'd be nuts. 2040, cool. I love 2040 as a remake. It has its ups and downs, but the way they rethought those characters in 2040, I thought was really impressive. Yeah, yeah, I think you're right, Matt. I think we'll get used to it, and they'll get used to it. They'll the artists will smooth out the rough spots and figure out how to make it look the way we want it to. It's all progress. It's all evolution. Everything's rough at the beginning, and then we get there. Oh, hey, Carl. Good to see you. 2040, I should warn you, has a very odd ending. Like in terms of like the last few moments of the show, it is a satisfying ending. Like it goes where you kind of want it to go in terms of feeling like this big ending. But like the last few shots are kind of like, what? And there's a very specific reason for that, which I will not spoil. But that's true. If you don't like CGI, there's plenty of anime to watch. There was an interview with Carl Maychek where he was helping to bring out Our Bachelor Dunbean, and the interviewer was like, aren't you concerned that people aren't going to watch an old anime? And you kind of hear his frustration. This was a text interview. We kind of hear his frustration in his words, where he was kind of like, well, if you haven't seen it before, is it really old anime? Right? Like, if it's completely new to you, then it's new in a sense. Why can't you just watch it no matter when it was made? It doesn't matter. That's right. There was a planned sequel for 2041. I don't remember what happened to it. Because I think sales of 2040 were brisk. I think that the show itself did well in America, at least. I don't know if they should complete Bunny Drop. I can see there being a lot of negative reaction to that, at least in the West. I don't think folks will go for that. Although actually, I gotta say, the more I've been reading like traditional Japanese myths and traditional Japanese fairy tales, the more I kind of get where they were going with that. Where a lot of those old stories were much more sympathetic to those kinds of relationships. So, but I think the West is not ready for the ending of Bunny Drop. Maybe Japan is. Maybe it would be fine in Japan, and that would be they just don't care about the Western response. Quite possible. I mean, I love more Bunny Drop. Don't get me wrong. I thoroughly enjoyed that manga, but I think it would definitely be controversial over here, especially with stuff like that. There's the THQ Nordic AMA on 8chan. Gosh, like that seemed like a really bad idea. Shouldn't have done that. It is interesting. Speaking of Bunny Drop, the rise of shows about adults interacting with little kids. I think there's definitely a lot of things trying to normalize little children to the average anime fan, probably so that they will actually repopulate the country, and and there will actually be a new generation of Japanese. Interesting. First time I saw CGI, probably Bebop. Although maybe Blue Sub 6 had come out before Bebop, or maybe I had seen Blue Sub 6 before Bebop. First CGI in anime. I don't think there's any in the like the Sci-Fi Channel stuff. If they had any CGI sequences, I don't think. Yeah, I suggested a lot of manga, J-Biz, so can't remember that quite off the moment. Forgive the slump. I've been working a lot of hours this week, and the job is stabilizing, but Zoids, yeah, definitely a lot of CGI in Zoids. Gosh, any CGI in Gundam Wing or Endless Waltz? I don't think so. Can't remember. Yotsubato, Jay. That's what you're thinking of. Yeah, that's I think one of the really big ones. Yeah, Initial D. The cars were definitely CGI. Definitely CGI. And obviously there were a few like sci-fi anime that would have like a CGI display on a screen or something. So that was probably I'm sure I saw an anime that had that in there somewhere, but I don't know if that really counts. It's basically just a special effect to show a grid. Oh, that would probably be the first. Well, I don't know if that was CGI or not. Thunderbirds 2086 was an anime adaptation of Thunderbirds, the Jerry Anderson British show, but set in space with international rescue in space. Very loose adaptation. And the opening credit sequence, I think, had some CGI in it. They had this really cool like grid that they drew, and you went in on, and then it showed the models of these ships. It might have been hand drawn. I'm not sure. It was definitely drawn to look like CGI. Bloodlust, possibly. Oh, Macross Plus, right? Definitely CGI in Macross Plus, with the missile sequence and all that stuff. Trying to think what else CGI was in Macross Plus. Actually, not that much. Kawamori is definitely a old school guy in terms of animation. Not against CGI at all, but his stuff tends to be pretty hand drawn. Although, I'm trying to remember, in Macross Frontier, yeah, those are all hand drawn mecha. He-Man in America versus Japan. That's an interesting question. I actually just watched. There's a great Netflix series called The Toys That Made Us, which is all about various major toy brands of the late 20th century. So Barbie, G.I. Joe, and there's one on He-Man. And boy, the folks who made He-Man are a colorful bunch. But yeah, I mean, He-Man is just such an American concept. Big, bulky, blonde guy. And in the original storyline, like a little mini comic they put in the toys, it's a Conan ripoff. Like he is just there's no Prince Adam. He's just this barbarian who goes around fighting off Skeletor, just having random adventures. And it's not that a Japanese kid couldn't possibly enjoy that, but it is such a Western thing. So yeah, I wonder how well, or if He-Man hit at all in Japan. I don't even know if they brought it over. I'm sure the toys filtered over to Japan, but did they even have He-Man as a TV show? I wonder. Did they dub it in Japanese? Boy, that'd be interesting. Watching He-Man in Japanese. Well, that's funny, Matt. I think when Beast Wars came out was also that right at that point where anime was getting cool, and people were hearing about this neat anime stuff, and so I think a lot of folks, because Beast Wars was a little darker, because it was more kind of stylized, and obviously it was CGI, but I think a lot of folks assumed it was anime because it had that kind of anime feel. And I'd argue Beast Machines was very anime inspired. Its themes are very traditional. But yeah. Yeah, I think Beast Wars certainly got a lot of attention when it came out from the average person. No, I mean, and a lot of those 80 shows are very similar. Wiseman and High. Um, He-Man, Thundercats, Jason the Wheeled Warriors. Oh gosh, what are some of the other? Heck, even GI Joe, while being team based, definitely about running around and fighting off bad guys. Um, a Brave Star are basically about these lone men out um, doing stuff. I wonder how Thundercats did in Japan. Because Thundercats seems like the kind of concept that would translate more easily to the Japanese market, because it is more fantastical. It's visually distinctive, so I can see folks getting excited about that. A lot of them were animated in Japan. It wasn't until the '90s really that the outsourcing moved to Korea, from what I understand. And that was kind of when I think the '90s were when it was kind of shifting from Japan to Korea. But yeah, GI Joe was Japan. I know. You think Transformers, obviously Japan. I mean, some things were North American. Care Bears, Inspector Gadget were Canadian. Tetsuya Nomura's Batman. I don't think I've seen that. No. Japanese Wolverine. Oh, the Marvel TV shows. Yeah, totally. Um, Transformers movie had some Akira animators on it. I'm not surprised. Um, well, and the animation director on that also founded one of the big Korean animation studios that did all that outsourcing. So they've been outsourcing. They've been animating American shows for decades, and he came out off of Transformers the movie. Um, oh, the Real Ghostbusters? Yeah. What's cool about the Real Ghostbusters is that, like, if you go back and watch the original Ghostbusters movie, it's not a movie for kids. It's got this very sarcastic sense of humor. Bill Murray's character is an a-hole, and it just has this vibe, this very kind of SNL vibe, very late night kind of a vibe, while not being so adult as to be to get like a hard R rating or anything, which is really interesting. I'm not aware of any Korean outsourcing that goes to North Korea, Saf. I'm pretty sure it's all South Korea. If you have evidence of the contrary, please link to me, because I'd be very interested to know. But I'm pretty sure it's all South Korea. Um, Wiseman, you're talking about like the Ghostbusters movie, like the live action original Ghostbusters live action movie. I can hear that. I can hear you there. The Bill Murray movie. Um, it's situational humor, right? It's watching these grown men fighting ghosts. It's really weird. Um, um, and it's Bill Murray's attitude towards Sigourney Weaver is really painful at times. Like he's a really nasty guy through a lot of that movie, but you're supposed to laugh at it because he's Bill Murray. Um, how to compare Japanese pop culture compared to American pop culture? That is too big of a question to answer. Like, how did you compare the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean? Uh, um, but yeah. So getting back to that topic, I think the Ghostbusters movie created this concept that was then very easy to translate into animation in a way that felt like the movie, but could be more jolly. It could be more goofy, and kind of get away from kind of that weirdness of the movie and then kind of the perviness of that character. So what are you quoting from there, Seth? Yeah, I'm very curious. Um, but yeah, and then the Ghostbusters animated series was um, could be a little more adult, a little more scary, a little more graphic, um, and they could kind of get away with that too because they were contrasting it with the other Ghostbusters cartoon. I'd have to read Pyongyang and see you know, how accurate that is. I'm curious. The link did not come through, Seth. Uh, YouTube strips out URLs, sadly. Not my policy, which is a YouTube thing. But so yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and you see a lot of darker stuff in certain shows back in the 80s and the 90s. Pirates of Dark Water, fairly dark, um, and just some interesting experimentation there. Phantom Zone, I think was the name of it, which was actually created by some Japanese creators, as I recall, but for the American audience. So like they had some designs and such, and they're like, let's do a show. And then they partnered with an American company to say, hey, you know, let's partner to make the show for America, using these kind of leftover designs from this thing. Kind of interesting. You're right. There's a RoboCop show. There was a Toxic Avenger show. That movie is not for kids. That movie's got nudity and blood and gore. It's hilarious. It's very intentionally schlock cinema. But then they made a cartoon out of it because, hey, sure, it's the 80s. Or I guess early 90s. Yeah, well, Black Cauldron was, intentionally dark. That was Japan. That was Disney trying to go in a new direction and trying to prove they were still relevant in a very dark time for that company, and it did not work. I actually have not seen the Black Cauldron for a long time. I love those books. I have those books right up here. I have my copies of those, which I read. I saw the movie as a kid, and I remember thinking, wow, this isn't, I was not as horrified by the Black Cauldron as other people were. Either from the perspective of it being too dark, or of it being, kind of too dark for a Disney movie, or of saying, oh, it's not perfectly, it's not a perfect adaptation of the books. Of course, it's not it's an adaptation. It's not going to be the same as the books. But that is the thing. I recall that being a really interesting experiment for Disney, but it flopped. Just sad. Um, yeah, Pirates of Dark Water got abandoned. Just not enough interest. The toys didn't go very far. I recall, if I recall correctly, the Dark Water toys were expensive. The figurines were fairly expensive, and then you could buy like the ship, and the ship was like just way more than any kid could afford. Why are the anime block on TV? Which do you think the anime blocks on the TV is still valuable on TV today as it was back then? Yeah, I think you're right, GA. I think I don't think TV is dying in the sense that it will be dead anytime soon. I don't think that Netflix and such will truly cause NBC to shut down its network. But I do think that people do not show up to watch TV anymore, unless it's like The Bachelor. So the blocks just aren't valuable. They don't bring in people. No one's going to show up for one show and then stay and continue watching shows after it. They'll show up for the one thing and then turn it off. It's interesting, Fisher. Yeah, there's some cool stuff. But yeah, and I think that's the thing is that now, and I think most preteens, if they want to watch a show, their parents queue it up on Netflix or the kid queues it up on Netflix, right? Like they don't really think about blocks. They just think about channels on a streaming service on Amazon Prime or whatever, where they can just go onto the family channel on Amazon Prime or what have you, and watch a show, and then what they recommend, I'll try Hilda, or I'll try whatever, and that's just the way it is. And if it's on TV, then great. They might show up for that stuff, but yeah, why would you? Most people do not get value out of appointment television. Much as TV likes the idea. And I think it's just growing more and more over time. And unfortunately, again, for TV, I think the preteen generation has been pretty much completely weaned off that. They see no value in appointment television. Yeah, totally, rental store. Well, and that was the thing, is that the rental store was the way to get around appointment television, where you didn't have to tune in at 4:30 p.m. on Friday to watch Robotech, or what have you, whatever. Yeah, I hear that to an extent, Matt. Although I do think there are plenty of ways of finding random stuff. I watch random things on Netflix all the time. I watched this. I watched that toy show. I watched Samurai Gourmet. Just because it was on it. I was scrolling through a long page and there was something. Wow, that's hilarious, GA. I hope nobody buys it, because it's like that's cool, but really, spend $100 on like an actual Eva model kit or something, in my opinion, at least. I don't know. So there is no firm date as of last I checked on the Netflix release of Evangelion, and the scuttlebutt is that they may be working on a dub. They may be redubbing it for Netflix, which is, who knows. Yeah, I agree with you, GA. It'd be one thing if Eva was 100 years old, but for something that's, for an artifact that's maybe 20 years old, that seems a little much. Oh, I don't know. I think I think Over the Garden Wall is as dark as Pirates of Dark Water or the real Ghostbusters. I think there's plenty of dark stuff for kids. Again, it's not common, but same thing. You know, GI Joe, Transformers, you know, all the safe stuff was safe, and there were these occasional weird dark things. Although even GI Joe, like the first GI Joe storyline, I remember being very controversial when it came out. There were, you know, newspaper articles complaining about it because Duke gets captured by Cobra, and they put a slave collar on him and force him to like bow down in front of them. I think while shirtless, and so there was concern that there were like gay overtones to it. But also like, wow, this is like some serious BDSM stuff here. Again, in the minds of a few people, it was like that was fairly edgy. So I don't know. But I do see what you're saying, Fisher, in the sense that I think I think what's happened is that parents are much less willing for their kids to watch something, you know, more edgy, more dark. On the other hand, I think kids have so much more access to stuff where, you know, let's be honest, there's some really nasty stuff that is a click away, you know, for most kids these days. I think parents are more overprotective, but it's also a much more open world in that sense. So, you're collecting Laserdiscs. Wow, do you have a Laserdisc player? A Laserdisc player, JBiz? Wow, I cannot talk tonight. Well, you have been watching. Well, yeah, and that's the thing, GA, is that I think parents were more willing to let their kids watch things like Conan the Barbarian. But I think today's parents are much more of a filter. Wow. Yeah, laser discs are something that I am not willing to spend money on. Like, I think it's cool. You go for it. You know, do your thing. But gosh, that's an expensive hobby. .hack. Now in the air the spring is calling. Speak, flowing wind, going down, blowing down the hills and valleys. Keep your eyes on me. I can't sing, as you can tell. The Thing at 8. Wow. That's a bit much. Aeon Flux, yeah. Aeon Flux made some anime fans, no question. That came out on MTV. A lot of folks were like, "What is this thing?" And it was like it was anime adjacent enough for folks to then go and look for other weird anime out there. And of course, you know, MTV was airing other anime along with Aeon Flux. So that definitely helped. Fractal, that's funny. Today, this morning, for the class before we got started, I plugged in my laptop, and I just showed the ending of the ending credits sequence of Fractal on a loop. Just that, you know, Down by the Sally Gardens ending on a loop, just as a nice relaxing thing for them to watch for like 10 minutes before we got into the day. Love that ending, as simple as it is, and the fact that as the show goes on, you're like, oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, MTV also was just very experimental. You know, they would fund weird stuff and just put it on and see what happened, because it was the Wild West of cable, and they could do that. So you got Beavis and Butthead and all the other craziness of MTV. But also, you know, that was the era of Rugrats and you know, Dexter's Lab and Powerpuff Girls, which were pretty bizarre shows, certainly for the time. You know, when you look at him on Powerpuff Girls, that's a really interesting statement. Yeah, Hey Arnold's a weird show. I don't know. All right. My mind is fading. I really want to continue this conversation, but I cannot come up with anything more to say. I'm just kind of So thank you all for joining me. As always, this has been a great conversation. I do plan to do the anime club tomorrow. We'll finish out the Eccentric Family. Looking forward to that. And we'll finish that out, and that will be our thing for tomorrow. I'll post a link in the Discord when we go live. I'll try to post a video as well. But yeah, teaching is a stressful job. I had someone break out in tears yesterday. That was fun. So yeah, thank you all very much. It's been a great night, and I will see you all for hopefully the Anime Club tomorrow, and if not, Drawing Inward and Workshop Wednesday and all that other stuff next week. Back in the saddle. And again, Drawing Inward's moved to Wednesday. Everything else. So take care all. See ya. Have a great one.